Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Avon Grove Charter School Board Working Session. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. So to start, if everyone would join me and stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And to open the agenda, if the board would recite the mission statement. Lifelong learning, one student at a time. And roll call. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Dave Maitland.
He is here.
Brian Martin. Colleen Preston. Here. Jason Chung.
Present.
Here.
Great. I don't see any public, but in case you do, we do recognize and we could have public comment if anyone chooses to do 3 minutes total per person, total 15 minutes altogether. Moving right along, business, Cowell Hill Capital Advisors.
Luigi needs internet access.
It's okay. My computer. Yeah, Josh will get it. Okay. My computer's actively viewed from my phone. Did you want to go ahead and introduce Sandy?
Okay, so I have on the call, we have Sandy Baxter, Amy Fulmer, and Dan Silvo with Cowell Hill Capital. And they're here to talk to us about USDA financing. I came to Kristen and I a couple of weeks ago, so we've done some research. AG, Kristen and I met with Sandy and Amy a few weeks ago. We revisited it in the finance committee, and we just wanted to share what this financing option looked like as we're vetting all options. So Sandy, the floor is yours. The presentation you have in front of you is what will be up on the board, but it's there for you to take.
Great.
Sandy, sorry for the delay.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Donna, and thanks everyone for having us in to go through this program. I've got Amy and Dan with me as well. We'll comment on this as we go, but hopefully you've had a chance to go through. There's about 7 slides here on the program. I'm happy to go through this. I don't really want to read it word for word, but sometimes I wind up doing that by default. But what we tried to do is provide an overview of what this is, how it works, how it compares to your other options, excuse me, and the timeline within which we think we can get this completed. And part of this would be sort of dual track with a potential bond issue in case, early on we determine that there's some problem or there's some hiccup with this program that's going to preclude us from going forward. So that's sort of the backdrop of this. Donna, I'll just go through this unless people want to start asking questions, but at the same time, if we do go through it, I invite folks to sort of interrupt us as we go along here to make it more of a dialogue, kind of like we did with the last discussion on public bonds. And we can, kind of handle it that way, if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
So this first slide here just kind of gives you a high level of what it is and what you need to do to qualify, the kind of location you need to be in, which you're in. It's a census program that says if you're below 20,000 residents, that's considered rural, and this program is available to you. West Grove, your zip code, which is how it's considered, I think you're about 11,000 residents, so it does fit this requirement. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier on. I think I mentioned it to Don and Kristen, but we had evaluated this program back in 2016 and presented it to the school. We were not the FA at the time, and we were with another firm, but we were, we'd come across the refunding opportunity and presented this program as a refinancing vehicle for the 2007 bonds. And I believe at the time we even called the USDA to make sure that this location qualified. I think it did. So this is, I guess a second time looking at it, a little bit of a more straightforward structure. There's no foundation requirement because it's all new money, but anyway, just to remind folks that this was brought up a couple of years ago when we first looked at the refinancing. So anyway, the process itself is sort of a two-step process. There's a pre-app and a full app. But the lion's share of the work, the lion's share of the data collection happens in the pre-application process. And it really happens once the pre-app is submitted. There's a pre-app that's prepared, and we would help Donna prepare all of this information. And then there's a checklist of items that goes along with it once that pre-app is submitted, and we'll go into that on the next slide. But really, what you have to do is go through the pre-app, and then you have to request bank loan funding, because the USDA doesn't finance through construction. What they do is provide financing to take out the construction loan that's provided to you by a bank. So what you would have to do is request a bank loan from a commercial bank, and you really need to make two requests from this bank loan. One of them you've got to request as if you're asking for it under your own credit, meaning that you would be repaying this bank loan from your own creditworthiness. That's to demonstrate to the USDA that you can't get loan terms substantially similar to what USDA can offer. That's just a requirement of the program to demonstrate that that's not available. But the real request, and the second piece of that loan request, is to request financing through the construction period that would then be refinanced by a USDA loan. And obviously, the USDA would be the government credit, clearly a lot stronger than Avon Grove. And the banks take comfort in the fact that there is a commitment already in place to refinance them once the construction is completed and the funds have been fully drawn out of their facility. The USDA loan rate is determined based on your final approval, or if the rate is lower when the funds are to be committed, or the loan is closed and the funds are then committed to refinance the construction loan, you get the benefit of that lower rate. So in your case, the current rate is a 3.5%. That rate changes on December 31st. It's unlikely you'd be able to secure that 3.5% rate. It changes every quarter. The trend that we've been tracking suggests that that rate's going to go up to about 4%, which would take effect January 1 through March 31st. There's a chance maybe we get that rate. But again, it depends on how quickly we go through the approval process and when we would get that final approval in hand. I think the good news is for Avon Grove is that you guys really are organized, have your ducks in order, and that goes a long way with this program because there's a lot of documentation that they request that I think, given that you've gone through a couple of financings, your experience with project work, you're well positioned to, I think, put together and go through this process. I think I heard a question. It's a little hard to hear on our end, but let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
I just wanted to know how that rate compares to just being on the normal market.
Yeah, so the tax exempt fixed rates right now are, for you, probably somewhere between 6.5 and 6.75. Rates over the past couple of days have actually come down in a significant way because the consumer price index came out last week and it was lower than expected, meaning inflation is actually coming down given the Fed's efforts to increase rates. So that was welcome news to the equity markets, which rallied, and our market, rates came down. So we had estimated in this document about a 680. It's probably between 650 and 675 today.
Is there any upfront points that you have to pay with the loan?
No points to my knowledge. It would just be a standard upfront cost of issuance for legal work. The USDA do not believe charges an upfront commitment fee. It would be your counsel, our fee. Through the bank loan, you'll have to pay bank's counsel. And the bank, when they do the construction loan, might have a commitment fee for that facility. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And, we can maybe even negotiate that out because it would be a competitive bid process to secure that. But Dan, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think there's any USDA upfront fees or points.
There are not.
So, and you'll forgive me, maybe I misunderstood. So it sounded like we have to take out or secure the bank loan and then go through that whole process, get the loan, and we're just going to refinance at the end with this guaranteed rate. Is that correct?
That's right.
But maybe for clarity, Dwayne,
Yeah.
the reality that we've been approved for the USDA loan means the likelihood of receiving a loan from the bank increases significantly.
Correct, right.
So-
So, but I guess, so in that period between we get the loan and when we refinance, we could be at a higher rate than repaying, or we're not repaying until after construction.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. You can answer, but we would be paying an interest only on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I think Sandy said, you said, hopefully, because we've got a secured if we get a secured USDA loan, the bank may give us a more competitive, favorable rate.
That's right, but that loan would only be in place really for, depending
A
on
year
your
and a half.
construction period, 15 months, 18 months or so.
Yep.
It's not terribly material. I mean, it is a consideration, and the competitive nature of the, bank process you'd run would hopefully bring, as competitive as a shorter term rate as possible.
The
No, I just
The
wanted
only-
to know, just so I understood.
the only interest rate risk is with respect to that bridge loan from the bank. It's normally because normally they're structured as drawdown. You're drawing them over a period of time during construction, and they're normally variable rate given the drawdown nature. So there is a chance that in this market, probable chance that the rate would increase over the draw period. Like Sandy said, over that construction horizon of 12 to 18 months. But your USDA rate would be locked in. You get two bites at the apple, if you will. The first being when you're obligated at the very beginning of the process, before you even close on your bank loan, because the bank will want to see that the USDA has approved you. The USDA will quote you an interest rate. And then they will quote you a rate again when you go to close on the USDA loan to do the refunding of the bank loan, and you get the lesser of the two interest rates in effect at those 2 points in time.
Oh, that's great.
Sandy, I know you said 3.5 when you met with Donna, myself, and Dave G, but you're saying if we don't lock in by January, it could be up to 4%. Is the reality of us being able to lock in before that 4%? Is that realistic?
I don't think so. I talked to them about that, and it's very, very unlikely you would get a final approval by the end of the year. We have to get through the pre-approval process, which takes a couple of months.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah,
And
and the
Sandy-
analysis we ran assumes 4%, which we'll get to. I did that because it's a 3.5 is, it's just not, it's not going to be feasible.
When you ran the numbers for the board previously in that document, I think you did 5, right? Was it 5% that you used? When you did the projection? Yeah,
Oh, in the projections, back in May,
yeah,
that was probably in the 550 range. That was a very different interest rate.
yeah, I was just
environment.
curious what
Yeah,
number you.
Yeah.
Okay,
it was 5 and change. I want to say there was a
or
530.
still much better.
Yeah.
So then, Sandy, do you think you could, and again, if you're thinking each quarter it's going up 0.5%, or it's just, this is the trend? And do you think you would hit the next quarter following January to March to get a 4%?
I mean, we certainly would do everything to try to get the January to March quarter rate locked in. It happens to be trending up 0.5%. It doesn't just go up by 50 basis points every quarter. It's based on an index. Yeah, and maybe between Jan and March for the April 1 rate, it's, it only goes up by 10 basis points, or maybe it comes down. But based on I've been looking at rates since I think it's early October through, I probably only went through the end of the month, maybe the first Friday of November. And I was in the high 3.9s based on that particular index that they use to calculate this rate. So I was just rounding up to 4% for this
Oh, yeah,
analysis.
and we're not holding you to that. I just wanted to understand.
Sandy, really quick, the current, like, if this trend with market continues and but like, would that impact the rate for the January rate as well?
Yes, but it's hard to say what's, so if rates continued on this, well, they could level out.
Sure.
So we may find ourselves in a 4% environment next quarter, and then it may be 4% again in the following quarter.
Yeah.
You know, with CPI coming out last week, that suggested that efforts are, you know, the efforts to control inflation are working. You know, our market came down 20 basis points, the tax exempt market, which is this index tracks that. So, you know, maybe that 4%, maybe it's not quite 4% in January. If rates are settling in or maybe even coming down, you know, maybe my estimate's a little high, hopefully.
Right. And so basically what you're saying is we're not going to be able to get 3.5. We don't know what's going to be in January. It could go up, it could down, it could level out. So we just need to be prepared for that.
We could get 3.5, but that's
Right.
again at the end of the
I
construction.
think
That could bite
it's
it out.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's.
That's
We should be
All right,
able to
Sandy.
estimate. We should be able to estimate it in about mid-December what it's going to be on what it flips to on Jan 1.
It's still going to be better than the common market, but that's fine. That's good.
that's right. That's exactly what I was going to say. No matter where it is, it's still going to be
Better.
considerably better than right now the current tax exempt, you know, rates out there for, you know, in your case, we're looking at a BB+ offering, I think, with this loaded debt, and that's hopefully it is BB+ rather than a rating down. And remember, you don't need a rating for this program. I think I mentioned that somewhere in here.
Oh, good.
So here's some of the sort of high level terms with this. I think we talked about most of this through the rate reset. This program allows you to go out 35 years. It used to be 40. They've backed that up a little bit. There's no maximum, so the $50 million project number is not a problem. Likely have to do this on a level debt service basis, but at rates being this low, that's not a problem for you. So, and we'll see that in a couple of slides down. You will have to fund a debt service reserve fund, but not out of loan proceeds. It'd be out of operations over a 10-year period, which again, we'll show you in the cash flow slide. Likely have to do a repair and replacement fund, which I think is what you do now under your 17 bonds. So no difference there, maybe at lower levels here than you do on the 17s. The 17s sound like there's quite a bit you got to fund, which is a little atypical. You can prepay this at any time with no cost. There's no call period. There's no lockout period. If you wanted an interest only period, they'll do up to 2 years. So that's available. That'd be up to you. No financial covenants. You'll still have the 17s you'll have to adhere to that the public bondholders require, but nothing under this program, unless maybe there's a debt service coverage covenant here. I take that back. There might be a coverage covenant. It would not be anything higher than what your coverage covenant is on the 17 bonds, which I think is a 125 or a 12. I have to just look into that and see if that's the case. If there's a covenant, it would only be debt service coverage. They do like to see an equity contribution. It's not mandatory for what they told me, but they certainly, I think the project gets a little more receptivity if there's some equity contribution in it. Someone else has some skin in the game. That's what they're really looking for through this. So I know the school's got, $6 million in hand. I don't know if all of that would need to go into it, but I think showing some support of your own funds is viewed favorably. So we might want to call upon some of that. Try not to call upon all of it at this favorable rate, but maybe some of it to just continue to get support at the national office.
Sandy,
Yes.
that equity contribution, did that take into account the funds we've already allocated and spent towards the project?
I think it would, yes.
Thank you.
And then the loan proceeds don't come out until the your construction period is closed and it's time to take out that loan. And then the loan proceeds are funded all at once. It's not a drawdown, but you don't really need that in this case. So here are some other sort of highlights of this program that gets into some of the deliverables and some of the other requirements. You know, they're a government agency, they're big on oversight, so they're going to want to make sure that all of the you know, all the efforts you went through to hire your professionals were done on a competitive basis, or they just want to review the process to see how you brought, you know, the professionals on board, you know, for the project, architects, engineers, us, etc. And then they're going to want to review those engagement contracts. Some of the items that are submitted once the pre-app is sent in include the financial feasibility study, which will help you through. There's an architectural feasibility study. I think the state has an architectural professional that helps you through that process and conducts a review of it. Just general organizational documents, your bylaws, things like that, which I'm sure you have readily available. Your board of directors, they're going to want to see some kind of evidence of community support. We can help you piece that together. I think we've done that for some other projects. Nothing's jumping out to me as to what that might look like, but Dan, I don't know if you could think of any examples for that.
Yeah, so the in support from families mainly. One example that comes to mind is we did this for a startup charter school down in Delaware, and we just had testimonials and feedback and survey information from families about how they were supportive of starting the school and were excited about the school. So anything you have supporting feedback from the community around getting the project done is helpful. You know, it's not, you know, it doesn't need to be overly formal in a particular format, just some type of information demonstrating community support.
Another big piece of their review and analysis is the environmental work. And that's, I think, beyond just a phase one, that there's also a historical preservation society that does a, believe it or not, like a soil test to make sure there's no, you know, historical preservation issues going on your site. Now, fortunately, you've been a charter school around for a long time, and where you plan to build, I think, is where your existing modulars are, and on land that you've owned for many, many years. And you've already gone through some environmental studies, so I would expect there to be no issue here. But their environmental work is a little more heavy-handed than what you're used to with the bondholders, and it's just a mandatory requirement that we have to go through.
There was another situation we did with the USDA, which was similar to yours in that the school had adjacent land to their to one of their more permanent buildings, and the USDA did have folks come out there and dig up soil and do soil samples. So again, they didn't find any issues, but they're looking for things like historical artifacts, Native American artifacts.
And, you know, through all this process, you know, I can just tell you, just on our preliminary conversations, they're excited about the project. They want to be helpful in getting you through these different pieces and the studies that need to go on, you know, the state inspectors that have to come in and review some of this stuff. It's not an adversarial relationship, you know, not that a bank loan, you know, is adversarial, but they're a little more friendly than a standard lender. You know, they want to be supportive, and they would like to see something like this succeed, and you know, their process help you along the way. So it's a supportive organization that you know, is easy to negotiate with. It's a process, it's a government agency, and they've got to fulfill the requirements of the program. So
there's one requirement here, Sandy, I didn't see that ended up being a big issue on one of our more recent projects, and that's they require construction monitoring. And that can be expensive if it's not already baked into your budget. Just something to keep in mind from a construction budget.
So Dan, that's both the bank having its construction monitor for the construction and then the USDA having its own construction monitor too throughout that build process?
No, there doesn't need to be two. There just needs to be one.
Okay.
But the banks will usually have a much more relaxed requirement around construction monitoring. USDA requires a daily construction monitor with a daily journal and log. Anytime there's work being done on the site, they expect there to be someone there monitoring the site, which again is a higher bar than most banks require.
That be our construction manager?
I think it would
Yes,
need to be an independent party.
Yes, very likely, and separate from the construction manager, another party that quite literally might just sit there in a truck on the site with a ledger, maybe come out, ask a few questions now and then.
So in that situation, if the construction manager would be a construction manager as the agent, not holding any of the contracts, so they're not really constructing any of it, would they be able to meet that requirement at that point, you think? They would be like a third party to the school, but they're not doing the work. Their overall, one of their main roles is to monitor the site, coordinate efforts.
Maybe I'm trying to think to whether or not we tried to do that in this other project, and if we hit any issues. It's something we will need to talk to them about.
Yeah, we just need clarification. That'd be good, because if we're hiring it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
USDA, they're comfortable sharing security with the 2017 bondholders, which in this case is going to be the mortgage and a lien on revenues. You do have to demonstrate that you can pass your ADTs under the 2017 documents, but they will share that mortgage with those holders and the revenues associated with it. We will have to get an appraisal of this. You wouldn't have to do that if you were going to the tax exempt markets, but USDA is going to require an appraisal. They don't lend on a loan to value basis, but I think it's just a checklist item that they have that recorded. So we would have to go through that process. And the bank, when we bring the bank on board, I believe whoever they use, and they might even line up with the USDA on that appraiser. That appraisal is acceptable to USDA.
And we actually had to, some of the regional offices might have different procedures, but Sandy in Delaware, we had to get an original appraisal and then an updated appraisal once the project was completed.
Okay.
So kind of like a pro forma, this is, as built, and then finally, once it is built, another appraisal.
Same company, just like a bring down?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
That particular project had a long construction cycle and it was multi-phase. So maybe if it's within 12 months, I think there's just a time limit on that appraisal. So I'm just double check if it's 12 months or 18 months.
Yeah, I could see that. I did talk to them briefly about the timeline so that, with your goal of having money, I just kind of put out a June 1st date next year to start your construction, presumably when the kids are out, so that bank loan will be available to fund your work. And that bank loan isn't going to appropriate you funds until they have the final approval. I mean, their loan is really contingent on the USDA's approval in order for them to go ahead and obligate you the funds. So they did say that was a doable timeline, suggesting that we get started sooner rather than later, but that's something that we can meet, given what's required and the process it takes to get through it. One of the other things they wanted to look at as part of just kind of confirming the rural status of the project is really where the students are coming from. And what they don't want to do is fund a project that might be in a location that's rural, but the students are all coming from, a jurisdiction that's got a high dense population. I don't think that's your case here, but that's really why they want to look at things like that. And even where the board of directors reside, they don't want your addresses. But they do want to just get a sense of, in this case, I've got county of residence to confirm that the constituents of schools serving, it, really does fit the rural nature of the program.
I think the concern I would have is I would not consider Chester County meeting the rural component. London Grove, West Grove may meet that component, but I think percentage wise, there's probably a larger percentage of students coming from.
I would say 30% of the kids are going to come from Hillsdale, which is more city urban. But the rest of them I would consider that would qualify. So is 30% too many?
I didn't quite catch all the full question, but what I did do is explain to the USDA office that you're drawing students primarily from Avon Grove School District. That's your authorizer. I mentioned that you have students from Coatesville too that come to the school, and they didn't seem to have an issue with.
Okay.
So would we have to provide you with a percentage by district to help you with that? We could do that.
I think that could do it, because when I started to talk about the districts that the main district, Avon Grove being your authorizing district, they seem to say, okay, that's, they took a little comfort in that. So if it's
Okay.
by district and we show them a list by district of where your students are coming from, that may be enough of what they need.
Okay.
I think we talked about some of this in detail already, the inspections and reports, all the public bidding process that they want to kind of review before you go through it. Again, it's just oversight on their part. It's part of the requirements of the program. One thing about the financial feasibility report, I think there are two sort of independent sign-offs that have to occur here. One is by a CPA, and we can help arrange that. We've done that in situations where we've brought a CPA on board that they approve of to sign off on this. And then there's another feasibility report. I believe it's on the projections that they want an independent third party to review and sign off on as well. Dan, I don't know if we came across that on either of the other two. But it sounds like they'll be. I know the CPA. I've seen that one before. There's a projections one that they talked about here, which we can, help clarify. And they typically have professionals that they use. They being USDA use if we don't have anyone at the ready, for some of this consultant work or to review some of these reports. They have a list of folks that they've used that they're comfortable with that we could call upon if we need to bring a professional in for something.
So on the last few, what we did was we actually produced the projections. We were the independent consultant on the projections, and we had a separate third-party CPA firm use those projections as part of their feasibility study or feasibility report.
So in this case, I know Charter Choices has been, or I think they're still trying to work out whether they will be providing the projections, but they could be sort of that independent team outside the school that we could use. And then we took a stab at comparing the two programs from a cash flow perspective. The Series 17, that's your current state of affairs, what you live and breathe today. And then the two loans, the USDA loan, the tax exempt bonds are shown side by side, so you can see the difference in cash flow between the two programs. The USDA, I have that going out a little bit shorter because they only finance 35. I think they'll go out 36 or 37 years, so it's a little bit shy.
You might want to ask if they'll optionally give you the ability to go out 40. One situation, they agreed to go out to 40 years right out of the gate, In another one, they gave us the option to extend out to 40 years at request in the event that the school ever needed it.
Yeah, I think what happened is when the pandemic hit and hit some of these project finance loans, like the student housing loans, like our loan with Westchester, some of the other PASHE loans, and they were not producing, so they couldn't pay debt service. They were restructuring these and they couldn't go beyond 40 because they were already 40. So they've changed the rules so that if there's ever a problem, they've got 5 years left that they can work within to restructure these. That's very recent from what it sounds like.
That was the preference on the one we did last year. Yeah, where they had to, they approved it with 35 and did, and we're gonna.
It
They wanted
sounds
that
like
buffer.
we can push them a little bit. But what I thought I'd do is just show it a little shorter because I don't know if we can go out the full 40, and with tax exempt bonds, you can, and I'm showing that here. You pay up for that. You know, once you go outside a 30-year maturity, you're dealing with a narrower buying base and a more unconventional maturity structure. So the cost of capital beyond 30 years gets a little high. But in any event, what we try to do here is show you the USDA loan, the first 10 years of the debt service reserve fund deposit, which you fund through operations, is part of your debt service payment. And then that rolls off in year 11, and you go from about 3.1 to 2.8. This is assuming a 4% rate, to be safe. The cost of issuance on this USDA loan is a little bit high at 2% of par. It's 1.1 million. I would expect that to be a bit lower, although you do have cost of issuance associated with the bank loan too. So the two together, I might not be too far off there. But what you do avoid is going through the authority, paying authority fees. You avoid paying an underwriter fee, which is costly, and an underwriter's counsel fee. So you do have some cost savings on cost of issuance because you won't have to get a tax exempt opinion. You don't have to use an underwriter. You don't have to
Credit rating.
use a conduit.
And credit rating. You don't go to the rating agency.
That's exactly a good point. You don't have to rate the deal. So you're saving a $70,000 credit rating fee as well. The tax exempt financing further to the right, which is what we talked about on our last meeting, the par is substantially higher because you have to fund that reserve fund out of bond proceeds. On the bond financing side, we are capitalizing interest for 2 years. We don't have to do that, but we show it here just to be conservative. We can back off of that to the extent that you can afford, starting to pay debt service sooner rather than later. Presumably, it would be interest only. We can defer principal payments. We do this on a 40-year basis, and we've got a full 2% of par cost of issuance. You probably won't have to do a taxable tail hill like you had to do on the 17s because the 2% cost of issuance should cover you on $80 million. I would hope it'd be no greater than $1.6 million. But the tax exempt bond financing at 80 million is substantially higher than the USDA financing at 54 because you don't have to fund that reserve fund. We aren't capitalizing interest, so you'd have to pay that. It'd be it wouldn't be as aggressive because you would be doing a drawdown for your bank facility. And with tax exempt bonds, the money would come to you on June 1st, 2023, at the full interest expense of up to 80 million. So, capitalizing interest is a serious consideration because you can't draw down money over time. You have to, pay interest on the full amount. And USDA will do a 2-year interest only period, up to 2-year interest only period. I think I have just 1 year here, but they'll go up to 2 years, especially given the size of this project and the fact that you're relying on new students to come in to afford the debt service, for the future debt service payments. And I explained to them that this is going to fund some growth in your student base. So they'll accommodate that through, an interest only period. I tried to highlight here that the max annual debt service between the two programs, on the USDA loan, it's higher earlier because it includes the debt service reserve fund deposit you'd make. And then on the bond issue, we're wrapping this around the 17 deal. So your max annual debt service actually falls on the latter part of the maturity scale, at just about 6.5 million. So, a bit higher, but it's because we're wrapping versus a level structure, which you'd probably somewhere in the $5.25 million range if this was to be a level payment schedule, like the USDA requires. And then this page here shows the comparison between the two and the cash flow comparison between the two structures. So I think the points on the left here, I sort of spoke to on the earlier slide, but this slide here is just to demonstrate, the savings over the bond issue, assuming a double B plus rate, using rates back from November 9th, the day before, we had a nice rate change, running to the tune of 2.1. And then, once you get to the latter part of the maturity schedule, it moves up to about 3.7 in savings. So this is an estimate based on a 4% rate from USDA, and I think it was about a 6.8% rate. Yeah, 683 on the tax exempt double B plus rated bond offering. And then the last slide here walks through a loose timeline, a general timeline. There's obviously a lot of activities that go on between now and June, but we try to just highlight, the milestones of the program. In this case, we talk about at least kicking it off with dual tracking it with an underwriter RFP for a bond issue, which we would be able to probably complete. And then, I think you'd have a good idea of who you might want to bring on board by the end of the year. We wouldn't have to start that process until next year, but you would have at least had the RFP period behind you, if we do have to switch to bonds. For the pre-app process, they're going to need a full construction budget with project cost breakdowns and the projections. Some of that stuff might be still being worked on. I know the projections are. They'd want to come out for a site visit. We'd start the bank loan process next month as well to secure that interim financing. We can easily pull that together. We've done it for others, and get that ready to go, whenever, the group approves, this group approves of proceeding. We would collect those responses and summarize them for you. We don't have to do a full 35 bank search. We can do a search of 3 to 5 banks, to make sure we get, a fairly competitive loan. Hopefully we can get our pre-app submitted by January. We do what we can to get that in as early as possible. And then we would start pulling together the checklist items, the contracts, the list of items that they're going to want to see as part of their review of the pre-app. They then take everything, they go to national office. I think the pre-app process then results in us being invited to submit a final application once all the pre-app items are in. And once the final app is submitted and approved, that's when we have the ability to secure a rate. And that's what the banks are going to look for before they obligate the funds on the construction loan. So there's a lot that goes on. Our work through this program is to help Donna and Kristen collect everything that's needed, liaise with the USDA. Given what I've seen so far of the senior leadership team, you guys are very organized. You probably have a lot of this stuff in probably nearly final form or available or will be available, given the way you guys do your work. That's not the case with a lot of these. Dan did a startup charter, and that was quite an undertaking, starting from zero, and successfully was able to get them through the process. So, you guys are light years ahead of something like that. So it's an aggressive timeline, but I'm confident, given this leadership team, that we can meet it, and we'll do our best to do that, if this is the direction you'd like to head. Any questions?
2014. I'm assuming we're gonna move forward with the application and just making sure that we try to see what we can get. But it's to say, looking at underwriters, so are you starting that process of contacting, I think we talked last time about getting the three.
We have the RFP, but we're waiting on financial projections. So it's just for the projections out for all of our disseminations today. So tomorrow's kind of regrouping and reprioritizing and trying to jump in and do the regular business office, the construction, and now and trying to shuffle that. Right. So the RFP will go out once I get her the new updated projection.
Okay.
So I'm working.
Okay, I just followed timeline, so I didn't know if that was the goal of having start before Thanksgiving or after. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm doing the best. I can.
All right.
I apologize. I'm not sure if there's a question there for us. I couldn't.
No, no.
Okay. Couldn't quite hear everything.
I was looking at your timeline, so I was
Okay.
looking for.
I mean, it would be good if we can hit that, so that would be good. So does anyone have any questions?
One thing I do want to mention in full disclosure and transparency, on our end, we would need to update our engagement letter to include this, effort. So I do want to make sure that group is aware of that, and I can get something to Donna to reflect that, but just to be fair as you think about it.
Well, thank you very much. This was great. There's a lot of information. This is a lot of work. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Sandy. I'll touch base in the morning.
Sounds great. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Or 18 minutes over the board meeting.
It's okay.
Well, we'll table Jared for the facilities portion.
That's all right. So I'm just going to read through these real quick. Policies presented to the board for their review for consideration to approve at the November 15th meeting this evening. Hopefully you went through them. They are 2047 hazing, 6008 food services, 6015 acceptable use of internet, computers, and network resources, 6030 breach of computerized personnel information, 6008.1 food handling at special events. In addition, the board is looking for us to approve at the board meeting the rescinding of the following policies: computer usage policy, internet safety policy, staff use of technology equipment policy, use of privately owned devices policy, use of privately owned computers policy, accessible use policy for technology, and food service policy. I'm not sure how food service and technology all kind of look. That's okay. Also, that will be presented tonight for the board to review for approval in December, on December 13th. 1015 concurrent enrollment rule credit. Number 2000 admission and enrollment of students, 2000.1 dual enrollment, 7001 public relations objectives, 7003 public participation in board meetings, 7004 public attendance at charter school events. At that same meeting, they will look to have rescinded the following: public participation in speakers at board meetings, admissions of student lottery process, dual enrollment, and enrollment policy. All right. Any questions on any of that? No. Any more comments from you, Kristen, anyone? No. Nope. All right, so do I have a motion to adjourn the working session?
I'll make the motion, Stacy Barno.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Blaze. Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Perfect. So adjourned. Give us 1 minute and we will go straight into the board meeting. All right, everyone, we are going to start the public board meeting for the Evan Grove Charter School. We do have a quorum. I ask everyone to please rise and say pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We did have an executive session for a personnel matter. If the board would please recite the mission statement. To inspire empathy for lifelong learning and one student at a time. Roll call, please. Here.
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 Present.
Here.
Perfect, thank you. Hope everyone got to review the board working session minutes from October 18th. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll motion Michelle McCray.
Thank you. Any discussion or comments? Do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, Colleen, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Perfect. Same thing, public board meeting minutes from the same date, October 18th. So I have a motion to approve.
I'll motion Stacy Barno.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Do I have a second?
Yeah, I can point out second.
Thank you, Deji. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? So moved. We did have a special board minutes or meeting to go through some financing questions and stuff. Do I have a motion to approve those?
I'll motion Michelle McCray.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions or comments? Do I have a second?
I will second Davey.
Thank you, Deji. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? So moved. We will not have a student representative report, but it will return on December 13th. Stay tuned. Public comment. The Evan Grove School Board of Directors recognizes the value of school governance for public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in board meetings. The board also recognizes its responsibility for proper governance of the district and the need to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner. In order to permit fair and orderly expression of public comment, the board requires that each statement made by a participant is limited to 3 minutes. Public comment will be limited to 30 minutes. The board will allow public comment on agenda items prior to acting on. And I don't think we have any public tonight, so we'll move on. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip anything I have. Facilities, Brian.
Sure.
There you go.
We ran this night, so the minutes are get available. I'll send them out. They're posted to board docs. I have a feeling that Jared's going to discuss most of what we discussed last night, so I will hold off.
All right. We'll get through these committees and then we'll come right back to you. Stacy.
The Human Resources Committee did meet. Tasha Bowers from HR discussed the participation. 89% participation rate in the school-wide survey that's being completed twice a year. So this is our second year completing. The committee also additionally discussed the current committee and meeting schedule. The group determined for the remainder of the school year, we will be meeting every other month upon there being a need for a meeting to be held. So we're going to be meeting in January, March, and May. And then the determination regarding the committee will be reevaluated by the board at the commencement of the next school.
Perfect. Strategic planning. I know, Blaze, you weren't there. Sherry?
Yes. What we ended up doing was we looked at policy first reading, and then we also went back and reviewed the portrait for graduate. Everything's wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
He hasn't brought up calendars yet. It's coming.
It'll be there before you know.
We did establish a new fundraising committee, and I think they did have a meeting. Deji, did you want to report?
Yeah, so we had a discussion around what the options are for this group to get together. We talked about what the next steps would be, which next steps are going to be that we're going to look to get a letter together, potentially like a live event together later next year. So a lot of things are still on the works. The letter has already been put together by Kristen and being updated at the current moment. And that will go out to the community. So for a public service announcement, if anybody would like to donate funds to us construction of the building, please feel free to reach out to Kristen personally. We'll be happy to set you up on the work that we're doing currently. So, but more to come. We will definitely spend more time talking through this.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. All right, we'll do the student enrollment and we'll get through this and then we'll be right into Jared.
Student enrollment's combined.
All right, data presentation. What's data presentation?
No.
Okay, good. Jared, come on up. You can either go up there, you can take a puck, or you could sit up here, whatever. Right.
So formally, I don't really have any new presentation from last month. We just met and discussed quite a few different items last night at the facilities committee meeting. I guess, Brian, do you want to go through the proposals at all for the infrastructure stuff, or is it more you want me to just follow up on the academic building and the construction manager?
My guess is the academic building.
Let's do that in the end. We can go through it.
Okay, perfect. So for the academic building, last evening, we really centered on a discussion of where the status is as far as approval for moving forward into the next phase for the professional services. As we provided from last month, I think the only real question that we had was the program comparison from what was existing in the modulars to the new. We had provided that to the board following that meeting. And then we also put together an updated budget that was the budget with the recommendations from a meeting with the administration and HSA that was just an update for that scenario. The next steps with that really is if the board is in a position to approve the professional services proposal to move forward with construction documentation, that would keep us on the current schedule timeline to target March bid documents to target getting construction started in June of 2023.
And I'm sorry, and you also require those. We're going to need those to move forward with any time. So without them, we're kind of dead in the water. So, so based on that, I guess the easy question is, a motion to start with the construction. Wow, Brian, thank you very much. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I guess I have a question. Is the construction documents going to be RFP or is that something
When you say the RFP, what do you mean?
they're putting out for its bidders?
So the proposal we put forth covers construction documentation and bid-based
Okay,
services.
construction documents, not bid service.
Correct. Yeah, we have two separate phases that we broke out in there.
Is that part of
It's not part of the construction documents, it's part of the proposal that we put forth that being proposed and motion.
One, this will eventually be.
Correct. That will be the next step. And then we'll put forth a separate proposal for construction administration to phase services if the board, if we get the bids back, the board wants to move forward with construction, then we'll have a proposal for those services at that time.
This is, I guess, the part during our conversation yesterday, Brian, where we talked about we aligned as 9 to determine how we're going to bid this out. Is that part of this discussion or not?
Well, to be clear, we're talking about the proposal that's in board docs, correct?
Correct.
So at this point, it's drafting of documentation, the items that are laid out within that document. I don't think at this point we're to that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, our intent would, as far as the,
I have no problem moving forward with it.
Yep.
My concern is what we talked about last night, where we need to align to understand what part's being bid out when. So I don't know how that becomes the documentation. Why?
so I mean, it does, and if we're going to try to do early package or anything, I would say that's what we need with working with a CM to develop over the next coming months to put together and present to the facilities and facilities committee and board of what our recommendations would be as the professionals of what you want. And if that aligns with what your expectations are, if we need to go back and relook at other options.
One of those early packages, just to make sure I'm on board, is the water. And that's a huge win, no matter which way.
Potentially, yeah, that would be the one that our work efforts up to this point have been to try to get it to be in a position where we could do that early if it works. But at least on the approval side, try to be in a position where that could be done sooner. And that would help to give a little bit of buffer in the overall construction schedule.
Doing much more part of my group period, but this particular case. I actually have.
In your thing. Well, do we want to hold it for finance, or we just want to, I'd rather just get it
We can
done.
do it, I'm happy to do it now.
Yeah, I could do that, yeah. I did not realize it was in there. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, so- All right. Oh, my goodness.
Number just, yeah. All you gotta do is read the motion.
All right, I know, I saw it. All right, so the motion, what we're looking for would be to approve Heckendorf and Childs Architects proposal for construction documentation and bid services proposal to the amount of $1,036,900 as presented. So that would be the motion that you're making.
That is the motion.
Ryan is thinking, is there any other questions or comments?
The scope is defined within the document. That's it.
Sure. Yeah. I will actually second the motion. Christine, would you like to do a roll call for this, please? It's okay. Yes.
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 Yeah.
So moved, unanimous. Go make a document. Do you want to, are you going to touch on the CM interview? Yeah.
Yeah, so we had some representatives from the board met with myself and Donna and Kristen. We had, as discussed in the board meetings, we requested proposals for construction manager as advisor services. We reached out to approximately 8, maybe 9 firms. We received 4 proposals back. 3 of them were qualified and moved on to an interview. So we interviewed those 3 firms. Following that, we met, and we believe really 2 of the firms really sort of seemed that they were poised to be able to meet the needs of the school. Based on our recommendation, I believe where everything landed and where we left last evening was to move forward with Dewey as the construction manager as an agent.
Did anyone have any questions? Because I know we couldn't have everyone there, but I did send out the recap. I want to make sure that everyone has the chance, if they had questions or concerns, they can voice them out, because we can answer the best we can.
Did they put a limit? Did we get an answer on the limit?
There's no specific limit. Like, no, there's no hard number to it. No specific limit is really what that is at this point.
Not the change order.
I didn't get that in writing, that specific question, no. But the approach right now is that we would be looking for their pre-construction services. That really wouldn't affect their pre-construction services as much as it would affect their construction services.
Full agreeing price based on all of it, not just the pre-construction.
Correct. And my recommendation really would be to have a follow-up discussion with them before any contracts are signed or anything to answer any fine-tuned questions. There were a couple items that were add-on items in our overall assessment that we included all of them, but there are a few of them that after further discussion with them, they were recommending maybe they'd be a time and expense item that's opposed to a lump sum, flat fee, fixed fees, might not be needed for this project.
Jared, I think the state we talked about.
I think phase 1 is efficient at this point in time. So again, it might be a good point of discussion with the DMs as well. I mean, I'm made it clear that that's why we were approaching this. That's why we wanted their fee broken out into 2 phases. But that's what I would be expecting.
So the question was, just so you take a note, is it the full amount or the phase 1 approach? And it's the phase 1 amount you're looking at.
Correct.
Do you have this one written too? Would you like to?
So motion to approve Dewey Engineering Inc. construction documentation and the bid service proposal phase 1 in the amount of $65,910 and presented.
I'll make them. Is there any questions or discussion or more questions? on
I have a question. Are they going to accept that? We're all doing one phase. Is the price good for that? one phase? So is it contingent?
I get what
on
you're
the
saying,
rest of
like
the
69,000 if it goes, yes.
contract?
I can't answer that directly without confirming with them. So I would have to confirm with them, but that would be the expectation or the requirement.
Can we make that motion then even? Can we approve something that we don't have?
So ask the question again, yeah.
So they provided their overall fee broken down into part 1 and part 2.
Okay.
So the motion is to approve part 1. The question is part 1's cost contingent on being approved for part 1 and part 2?
Yeah.
Are
They're gonna up that fee 69 to whatever if we don't use them for the rest of the phase.
the assumption would be that it should not, because there is an understanding that it may not go forward past bidding. Like, so like they wouldn't get that overall, there's a potential they wouldn't get the other
So if
fee
we
anyway,
pass this
but
motion, we could amend it, that they have to guarantee that amount would not change.
yes, I think that would be the way to do that, to help cover
Yeah.
any of your end. And
Yeah, that way we
when we
cover,
speak to
like,
them
here it
tomorrow,
You have to agree to this. so-
So since the motion has been before, we start to vote on this and the then we vote here.
Correct. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that my question was just clear, because I feel like I'm getting.
I think,
back.
I think,
Your question's clear.
Okay,
I think we're,
okay, that's fine. All right.
I think you're just saying, as long as, no matter what happened with phase 2, that first phase amount does not change.
I guess from my perspective, I'm not prepared to move into phase 2 at all without understanding whether or not they're going to accept. If, again, we as a group decide we want to have 16 different RFPs go out, and are they comfortable handling? Jared said he had to talk to them to find out. So if he goes back tomorrow and we approve part 1, and they're saying we need to give the whole contract, and they say, no, we only want to do 7 contracts, 7 RFPs, then their number may change on a whole. We're voting. Am I making linear sense here? In my mind, I'm not. I'm not the one explaining.
So there are two, no, this is great, I want to make sure, so there are 2 parts to this, right, 1 and 2.
correct,
So they have quoted us for both.
correct.
They know that we are going to either approve, they're hoping we approve part 1. And hopefully that we would follow up with part 2, but they know there's a chance that we could say, whoa, can't do part 2. So we're just bidding on part 1. And that's it, and they understand.
Okay, so we're only,
Only bidding on part 1.
okay, but we're not sure if that part 1 price is even that price because it may be continued.
I will have to confirm with them.
Yeah,
Like,
And
I
we're gonna have,
can't
that's
speak
what
to
they
them.
will
That's
most.
Okay, that's fine.
So then I'll withdraw my motion.
Well, we have to let it die.
Yes. Or we didn't get a second, so I can just withdraw it. But if you'd like to, we can go through and vote on it. Yeah, I'll just.
So
withdraw
you
it.
resume-
Reword it.
Yeah, we're gonna reword it. No, I think, yeah, you wanna, yeah, that makes sense.
I understand what you mean for the second phase 2, if it impacts any of that, but
It wasn't linear in his mind.
I know, no, I thought.
I got it.
and I said, I think we would, before anything is signed with them, we would be meeting with them and confirming everything is upsetting prior to.
Yeah. So motion to approve duty engineering and construction documentation and bid services proposal. Phase 1 in the amount of $65,910, contingent on the guarantee that the phase 1 and 2 pricing remains the same. Have a motion for that.
I'll make that motion. Any follow-up question? Do we,
Give a second.
I second.
yes,
Yeah.
Jason Maitland,
yes.
Brian Wilson.
Yes.
Colleen. Jason John.
Okay. We're moving right along.
Leave that, everything else, there's anything else you'd like me to?
No, does anyone have any further questions for Tara? Thank you for all your hard work.
Yes, thank you all. Look forward to seeing you next one.
1904
Aye.
with. I have Kim Tremmel here tonight. And Kim Tremmel is our data coordinator among curriculum work and everything else that she does here at school. Before she presents, I know you can, I know that this conversation with the board, we have this conversation during benchmark time. This is our big data presentation because we did get some of our PSSA keystone information back. I'm prefacing all this conversation. COVID did put it back. Every school is trying to make gains from what happened during COVID. It's not an excuse, but the reality.
No, it's nationwide, yeah.
In every other school. What I also want to say is all of that state testing is testing that goes with building upon skills for the bigger picture, right? There's a lot of application that happens when you take those tests. So benchmark data for us is more important right now to make sure they get baseline skills so that they can take tests that have these types of applications. I also want to bring to your attention that we are drawing from multiple school districts. So we're not comparing Avongrove to Avongrove and Coatesville to Coatesville. We are comparing all of those different districts and kids coming to us at different times. So I am not unhappy with the progress, but I can see very clearly in this data that there's a lot of work to do. And the reality of that with our administrative team is we're wide awake.
Right.
Okay. So with that being said, go at it, Kim. And she's going to start with worst of it.
Good.
Real quick, how many we made around the benchmark? Can you help clarify that a little bit? Like, since we're drawing from multiple school districts,
Right.
are we been marking all of the kids versus each individual school district separately, or like kids from Crystal versus kids from?
Yeah, so what happens here in the state, every school building gets a different school. They don't do that for charter schools. We just get one lump score. So you're gonna see some things you just cannot compare, right? What I'm saying is when we do benchmark data, it doesn't matter what district they come from. They all get the same as a fourth grader. You should have this expectation of this benchmark in the fall and then in the winter and the spring. So we're not treating them any different, but even special education. This is the expectation because that's the test they're going to take no matter what district, what special education, diagnosis they have. So we are just trying to give them intervention based on what they. So you'll see that too. But it is difficult when you're looking at some of the comparisons because, and Kim will point that out, it's not. Okay, you're right. All right, take it away, Kim.
Perfect.
And Mr. Bruno's here too. Full support, and Ms. London's here too. There's support. Anything that you have questions.
Okay. So we are going to start with looking at our PSSA data. So you'll see in this graph, you're going to see 4 years worth of data, 2 years prior to the pandemic and 2 years post-pandemic. So obviously the blank in the middle is the spring of 2020 when we did not test students. So this is our ELA scores. So you'll see where we were before the pandemic, and then obviously you see a drop off for the past 2 years in the 2021 and the 21-22, but you will see that there are some gains from in each of those areas. You also will note that from year to year, the same cohort of students did also grow. So if you look at like the yellow bar in 6th grade and then look at the light blue bar in 7th grade, you can see that the percentage of students at proficient or advanced did increase. So we did see gains in that for ELA.
And it is expected to see the gain, the drop off. Remember kids during the pandemic, not getting those basic skills, it's the way we used to get that in those early grades, you're going to start seeing the effect of that 3 to 6.
So then for math, same thing. So you'll see pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, math scores are definitely a lot lower than our ELA scores, but that's also reflective of the fact that math builds upon skills from year to year. So when you have gaps in learning and you have online learning or students not in really learning at all, depending on the situation, those gaps are going to increase. And therefore, in those last 2 years, we've been backfilling with previous prereq skills in order to do that. So it's hard to kind of cover all of that content within a specific given year when you're trying to backfill previous years as well. Science, we've been pretty consistent before and after. So you'll see a little bit of a drop off in 4th grade, but we increased again last year. In 8th grade is actually higher than we've been. So we're making pretty significant gains in our science across the board. So then these are the cohorts. So this would be the same group of students that are traveling through. So this example shows you in ELA, 3rd grade students in 2019, they obviously did not test as a 4th grader, and then their 5th grade and 6th grade scores. So you'll see that between when they tested in 3rd grade and then last year when they were a 6th grader, we did see gains in achievement in this particular group of students. And then this is another cohort of students, the 4th graders in 2019 and 7th graders last year. So again, you'll see that there were gains made overall percentage of students proficient or advanced in that particular grouping. And then this is a 5th to 8th grade cohort. So this one, it stays a little bit, it's a little bit lower in 8th grade, but again, that's a lot of between 5th and 8th is a lot more of the writing and the deeper understanding of being able to write a text dependent analysis question, higher level standard of comprehension. So that's also an issue that we haven't been able to cover in those amount of time. And then for math, so this shows the cohort for 3rd through 6th. So again, like I said, math really is the building block. So unfortunately, it's not as easy to recoup those skills as it is in ELA. ELA, the same standards are the same each year. It's just them being increased in text rigor and complexity, where in math, you need to know 3rd grade skills in order to do 4th grade math. So this is why our cohort scores are the way they are for math across the board. So this is a 3rd through 6th example, 4th through 7th grade, and then the last one's the 5th through 8th.
Maybe out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So what more do you like? What more would you need
Time and,
Yeah.
and us to do these interventions. They're not going to work overnight. We're seeing the gains. It's baby steps. You know, it's going to take time. This is not going to be fixed. And so I think that I'm happy with the gains that we're seeing. We're putting every intervention in place. We have hired more interventionists. So we're doing everything we can at this point. Now going to take, we got to give it the time to parents, helping at home, supporting the school, supporting the teachers. These are all things that have to happen for all to make gains.
And you'll see when I go over, I'm sorry. You'll see when I go over my benchmarks data that you'll see where we are right now as far as foundational skills, because PSSA is completely 100% application. So until you have foundational skills down, which is we're finally in a good spot, you'll see that that's the key toward reaching that success at the standardized test level.
So I guess my question is, I know we do group intervention. I guess my question on that is there data that shows that if there's proficient kids that are being slowed down in their learning, is that, I don't, if a kid can run a mile, right, in
Mhm.
4 minutes, but he has to wait for everybody else to catch up to finish his mile in 5 minutes, but if he was pushed, he could actually run it in 4.
Mhm.
This is my bad way of trying to figure out, a good analogy here.
Yeah.
Are we slowing down the kids that could be running it in 4 minutes and being proficient and increasing those scores by doing the group intervention, and making them wait for the 5-minute pockets? In my really poor example there, you follow?
Group inter. Gross.
Like, when
I don't,
that are efficient students continuing
To grow?
or they grow to advance.
got it.
Right, exactly, because if they're waiting and they're not being challenged, in math, one, I'm not being challenged. Multiplication tables.
Mhm.
And I'm waiting for everybody else to learn multiplication.
No.
Okay.
But there's differentiation that's happening. We have CAP, we have other ways that kids are getting enrichment. And I'm sure even as you, as parents, are seeing what your kids are doing at home. Like I know what my children are doing and what they're getting. And so you can't, the answer to that is no, there's still differentiation happening. We're not slowing kids down by doing group intervention to
Okay.
give them what they need.
Okay.
If the kids are, there's basic skills that all kids need, and once they reach that, they get the next step. It's what,
Okay.
and a lot of our intervention.
Yeah, I think what Brian was saying is what I was more or less looking.
Looking for
So
growth.
In the 4th graders, were they?
Yeah.
Was the 30% of kids that were?
So we'll,
A
yeah,
little bit of.
Okay.
We- yeah.
growth. I don't think we have like the whisk. Sure, we have stuff we can give it to you if you wanted to see the deeper statistics.
Needed, I'm just curious, it's definitely something you guys are looking. I don't need to see, I just want to make sure that. Part of mine.
yeah.
Oh, no, mine does not piggyback on this, so you go ahead. You piggyback.
Piggyback on that, but so the definition of CAP is are the kids who are advanced, does that change now based on sort of the baseline? Given like what you're seeing?
The qualifications haven't changed. But the amount of kids that might have qualified in the past, but I'm not actually seeing that data where I'm seeing kids not qualified based on that.
Right.
Usually your good test takers are always gonna be good test takers, COVID or no COVID. That didn't change. So, I'm not seeing that.
Mm-mm. No,
I haven't had that.
My question is totally unrelated, but you list the number of test takers each grade section, like you have 105 did the math cohort, third cohort group.
You go back.
So you don't have, but those kids are the same kids you track, because we have turnover and back and forth and stuff. So you're using the same group, even if we had people drop out. Okay.
yeah,
Be in that cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have.
All for all those grade levels.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We didn't.
Yes.
correct.
Take it.
Right. And do we know then the ones that aren't in the cohort?
At the individual.
Yeah, okay.
But if we're just trying to look at, so the cohort group levels are oftentimes good examples. Students who stay with us, how is distant education with us? Affecting this thing?
And they're still in the overall.
And that's, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Everyone's in that.
I don't know if there's an answer for this, but the science is typically language arts put together. How come something didn't take such a beating like language arts and math did on PSSA?
I know how I would answer that.
I know.
Oh, look, Caitlin.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So, Yeah.
Of all of your students, with the accommodation of real life. Don't.
Yeah.
So it's disproportionately.
Very helpful. I didn't know.
and PA core standards for ELA and math are what changed. Science standards have not, so they're the original standards. Yeah, well, Yeah, the
Either was saying-
seal.
Yeah, I forget. We all would answer that.
But I have to say, good job, everyone, even for the after-school tutoring and different things. So I've seen a lot through the school, trying to fill in these gaps. and Much appreciated as a parent. Thanks.
Okay, so then we have Keystones. So Keystones are our high school exam in algebra, bio, and lit. So these are our spring tester percentages of proficient in advance. So again, the 2 years prior to the pandemic and then the 2 years after. So you'll see that we did have a drop in biology scores from the 19 school year. Lit stayed the same other than last year. We had a drop. Algebra's been consistent kind of across the board. But again, the math that algebra needs is, especially in the last 2 years, missed middle school math, which is all that pre-algebra foundation. So without that and having to backfill, scores are obviously going to be reflective there.
What do you attribute the drop in literature to?
For last year. I know. I 100% agree. I don't know the answer to that question. I was surprised by that percentage as well. So the lit exam is the 10th grade year. Yep. Okay, so then we do not have, I usually showcase and compare our scores to our sending districts, but the state has not released that information yet. So I only did a comparison to just the state numbers. So in ELA, we are the blue bar, and then Pennsylvania is the orange. So we've exceeded or met, we're in the same average. What I think is nice is like in our middle school, we're highly above the bar in that. So there's a little bit more of a gap between us and the state comparison, which is nice to see. And then for math, you'll see we're right at the state average in most cases, a little bit above, but pretty comparable to where this whole state is. So obviously math is a core issue across the state of Pennsylvania. And then science, so we are above state averages in science as well for both grade levels. And then for Keystone exams, again, above state averages, so at least we're there, yeah.
Oh, you're exceeding them.
Right.
When you get the individual data. share that.
Yeah.
You see, you'll see
Yep.
the pools. You're gonna see the pools. And that's gonna be really interesting. Go ahead.
But yeah.
We'll keep going.
Okay, so then PVOS scores are our growth measure. So this is where we can see, did students meet the projected amount of growth that they were supposed to have in each of the academic achievement levels. So the ELA quintile diagnostic summary. So this will show the achievement groups split into 5 groups.
So if I'm in 8th grade, it looks at all my historical testing. And then said, based on all the kids who have ever taken the PSSA across Pennsylvania since we began, or similar to you, for this, did you meet that group value added? Basically,
To compare myself.
correct, yeah, they're being compared to history of taking, and then the trend of that similar group. Now, in this is where you're seeing the quintile groups, 5 are highest advanced students, blue.
Okay. So blue is saying that that particular group of students exceeded the growth standard. Green is saying that it met the growth standard, and then yellow is saying that it did not meet the growth standard. So you'll see for each of the grade levels, you'll see the 2022 growth and then previous years. So last year, you'll see that everything is in either meeting or exceeding, except for the highest quintile group in 4th grade for ELA. Everything else is in.
Little.
Yeah, what evidence would they even use? That's the first year they're taking the PSSA, so are they using,
Fourth
They
grade.
use the 3rd grade.
fourth grade, you're right, third grade.
So there's no red. Red would have been like this group did not. So your quintile groups of 4 and 5, those students are more efficient or advanced on the PSSA. Talking about they still.
And then for math, so same thing. So this shows us which ones met and exceeded from last year versus previous years. And again, there's a couple areas where we did not meet, some in the 4th grade, some in the 5th grade, and some in the 7th grade, but everyone else either met or exceeded in each of those quintile groups. So science, 4th grade is so just that low mid group was the one that stands out of not meeting. 8th grade across the board, most of them were exceeded except for that lowest group that met, so that was great. And then keystone exams. So for algebra, bio, and lit, you'll see all of the areas. So algebra 1, even though the achievement wasn't necessarily high, growth was across the board other than in that highest achievement group. Biology was fine across the board, and then lit just that lowest end group.
So in the literature, there was a question of why was that low efficiency rate, but look at each quintile test tables, they all sort of met what they're expecting based on all of the previous years of PF.
How did that balance? Yeah, but my,
So Keystone exam,
yeah,
you
what
go
you
back to
just,
my,
when you just said, doesn't,
so what it's doing is that for the literature, the students who tested literature.
Sure.
I'm coming into my 10th grade. I personally have 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade scores on the ELA. The value added scores, look at my historical data, look at all the history of all the test takers, never taken the PSS, and say of the historical test takers, there's a group now that have tested similar to my history. And then it will say, based on what those students scored on the literature exam, it establishes goal growth. And if now in that literature quintile groups, if it's green or blue, it means that that group of students in that quintile group either met or exceeded what the historical value added projection should have been for that group. So while some of them were not proficient, it's almost as if the projection was you weren't expected to be proficient based on your testing history, historical testing history, but you met where you were supposed to be on sort of that scale.
So what's the 8.1 thing?
It's a value added measure score. So there's math formula that will go into the strength of that. The higher the number, the more evidence and more growth within that. The other number is the N count of test results. 33, 32, 20, 23, 42 within that algebra would have been N count of tests.
So just again, go back.
Yeah.
Bio, right? In grade 3, you run to 6. Grade 4, you run to 5 minutes. You're saying that in grade 5, based on historical numbers of PSSAs, he's supposed to run a 4.5.
Correct.
And then it scores it out.
Yeah.
Green means he attained it. Green means he did.
Green means he hit the 4.5.
Oh, sorry, green, blue.
Blue, he hit the 4.5.
I felt that.
Yeah.
I
Yellow.
mean, yellow means
We did not.
5 miles.
Yeah, or he was to it, but maybe didn't mean
Right, but that was again, basically historical. Everything else.
correct.
I use that.
let me call that now, but then the total group. When we go back to the, I think it was like side 10 or whatever it was, like the total group though, not everybody met the expectation.
You'll see that the whole grade level group on the next.
So here is where you'll see for math, for PSSAs, you'll see across the board 4 grade levels where the whole grade level stands. So you'll see that in math, 4th grade, 5th grade, 7th grade did not meet those targets at a whole grade level.
And I'll put out, I have not read it, sure. I don't know if it's value added score. Statistics behind it, it's just taking ratio. The gap in a testing year, but it still looks at historical value added data. So how you tested before the pandemic, how you tested. Now that should adjust. But you never know.
And then, so in ELA, on the other hand, you see it's all across the board, we were above, well above or meet in all of them. So our ELA value added looks good as far as growth is concerned. Science, we met or were well above for 8th grade science. So growth looks really good there. And then for the Keystone exams, again, well above in algebra and biology and met in literature. So our growth targets, at least from ELA standpoint, science and our Keystone exams look really well, good at this point.
So this is the interesting part. So this is all the schools. And if you look, you have to remember, you see Coatesville.
Hire's better.
Yeah, so the highest is Avon Grove High School. This is all of our spending districts, but it's by building.
Correct.
And you see, you know, Avon Grove schools there did well, 89, 85, 84. Octorara Elementary Schools in there and Kennett, but us as a whole school is at 76.7. We also have all those, the Coatesville kids and the Oxford kids. And so for us to have that 76.7, when we have 30% Avon Grove, 30% Coatesville, 30% Oxford, we did pretty well, depending on all those other schools that are scoring in the 60s and 40s.
You're averaging, some could bring you down, some could bring you down. Well, I mean, you think,
But I mean, it still shows that we're in the top
Third.
bracket. Oh, well, I don't even, I'm not looking at that. That's not the comparison I'm making, but
The only thing you can draw from that though is to say that like, differentiated experience you can see here produces this end result. Like the factor of like a school that they come from, those that it's meaningless.
This is comparing some. I mean, if we were able to calculate a divisional based score like we have, like a 3rd grade score, ELF or ELC, third grade, to an elementary building that only looks 4 to 6. We try to recalculate that to meet some of the grade building calculation configurations on there. And then you would still have a heterogeneous group of students coming from different districts to a baseline.
And it doesn't.
Mhm.
To or very different.
Yeah.
and yeah, and this is the sending district, like Downingtown had 70s, 60s. So this did not, this is not showing you, this is not an Avon Grove charter school issue. This is a school-wide issue. And where you're seeing some of the big gaps, I'm not shocked. Like looking at some of these schools, I'm not shocked to see where they are. It's sad to see some of the numbers, but this is a good slide showing you this is happening everywhere.
is this? I'm gonna try and ask this correctly. Yes, does this take into account just those, remember that question I asked before, are they all the same?
So this takes into account papers from last year with
Mhm.
this 13 building score is different than our profile scores, it's a different calculation.
So this doesn't really account for if I was in school district X for up to grade X.
Being with us for the first time next year, you're in our
Mhm.
division.
Because that you didn't have the benefit of having numbers. Okay, that's that. You answered.
Still good.
No,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really answer.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
That you can see now, like where the other schools are struggling.
Thank you.
So that was all the standardized stuff. Now we get into benchmarks, which are our assessments that we give here right at the school. So we do testing 3 times a year. So our first set of testing occurred in October. Each grade level, we use 3 different data points to determine which tiers. So I know I talked to you guys about that before, but we're just a reminder. So tier 1 means that the students, all they need is the regular core instruction that's happening in the classroom. Tier 2 students are getting class-wide intervention, which we give for everybody in K through 6 at this point. We started that last year, and that's why I think a lot of our foundational skills have been cleaned up. So tier 2 students get that plus in-class supports, and then tier 3 students are getting class-wide intervention plus targeted intervention in small groups. So this is our divisional data for reading in each of the divisions. So for K to 3, we're tier 1 was 70%, with tier 3 being 14, 4 to 6, 74%, with tier 3 being 14, and then 7 to 8, 64 and 14. So in a perfect RTI triangle, you want 80, 15, 5. So at this point, we're at a really good starting point to the year. This is higher than we've ever actually had before, even prior to the pandemic in some of these divisions. So our foundational skills are definitely increasing at this point.
Our kindergarten has never scored so high. and I
Correct.
think that definitely is due to Tim's hard work with the teachers. Prior to the pandemic, the teachers were not as thoughtful about data and using data in their instruction. The teachers now see what a deficit the kids have, and now it's all about using the data. And we're seeing that in the instruction for sure.
So then for math divisionally, so K3 is actually at an 86. So they're
Huge.
yeah, and like I said, I've never, as long as I've been in this position, I've never seen it look like this. So we're all very excited. So K3 is the 86, 4 to 6 is at 63 and 15 for tier 3, and 7 to 8 is 32 and 25. I do want to note about 7th and 8th grade math benchmarks and why that number seems very low for tier 1. So the benchmark system that we use for K through 6, the math measures stop at 6th grade. So we actually use different screeners in the middle school that aren't necessarily a benchmark normed thing that they have to be at a certain percentile in the fall. So the middle school percentiles, each of the times will get the same screener. So that would be more indicative at the end of the year that there should be at that planar triangle.
So great to see the math. 83.
Yep.
But you just said, just ago that they're getting class-wide interventions.
Yes.
So, like, going back to the file, so it's 6% of people who are behind. They're doing class intervention. 80% of people that are already there in the seat.
Correct. Class-wide intervention is at grade level. So we use a program for math. We use Spring Math, and then so that is basically grade level skills that the kids are doing. So it's not below grade. Classified intervention is just a peer. So they work in partners and they're just practicing foundational fluency skills. So that's something that we have been lacking in math in general, especially in the upper grades. Teachers, number one complaint has been kids don't know their math facts. The fluency is not there. They can't build complex problems without having those basic skills. So that was the purpose of putting class-wide intervention for math specifically in place. So that actually, it's not holding them back. It's only 15 minutes a day and it's part of their math block.
Yeah, I'm just curious because it looks
Yep.
like such a good number.
I think that's because of what is happening in the classroom.
I would agree that it's because of what's happening, and also that K to 3 block only only those third graders are COVID kids. Like K1 and 2, they didn't miss school time, you know, like that second grade maybe.
Second, yep, K and 1 are
But
definitely
they were
not.
in,
So do you think
They were-
part of that, kind of going on what they're both saying?
Yeah.
Are the teachers, and I think you kind of said it, if they're using the data, but are they also teaching different because of having to catch up? They're doing it differently.
yes,
Okay, that's what I'm saying,
yes.
and that's what it's showing.
And it is also showing why you're seeing teacher stress.
Yeah.
Nationwide, because teachers are overwhelmed with trying to catch up and dealing with the mental health issues and dealing with, there's so much, it's so much,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, what would be asked from us, for these three specifically, but given what you just described, that's where I'm trying to get at. Like, is there anything else? For teachers in this, right? Like they're doing a ton of work. Is there anything else that?
I think celebrating the success, like, and understanding the expectation around where they are and what they're doing for kids. I think that is great support because you're learning, you're understanding. I think there's sometimes expectation of, okay, that I see a lot of red, like, what are we gonna do? And understanding that this information is really important and where you need to see the growth before they have to walk before they can run, kind of understanding. I think that's huge. Teacher time is another part, like they need planning time to be able to meet all these expectations. So the support of those half days, they have said they have gone, they've really used that and value that because it's helped them plan better lessons, it's given them the time to reflect on the data. So I think supporting them that way, it's my personal opinion, what I'm hearing from feedback. You guys could have more, but that's what I,
Can I just, maybe high five and attach that is great, so like I wonder if there's like something. I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
pretty crazy idea.
teacher time, those half
There's a
days.
breakfast in it.
Those half days in the calendar, I'm telling you, has been, and if we want to look at that a little further, I mean, I know that they really value. Did you guys have any other thoughts?
We'll think about it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can think more about it. And I can bring it back to the teachers and tell them that you had this presentation and ask them,
They don't
you know.
know.
yeah.
Or
I think
even
that's
if
what-
additional aid team ups, like what?
Everybody will say more staff, everybody will say more coach, that comes with more money, which comes with, they all want space, they all want, you know what I
We're
mean?
trying.
There's all of these things that
We
Obviously,
approved the construction documents.
help with financial backing too, so, yeah, I
You
get
know,
it.
and I think we've all seen, and we're all saying that we see this trend, and we understand that there's 2 years that go. It can't be helped. All right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So then as far as school-wide, so this would be K-8. So we're currently sitting at 70% tier 1 and 14% at tier 3. And for math, 65% tier 1 and 13% tier 3. So based on that, at this point, we have made revisions to goals that were made at the end of last year based on numbers. So divisional goals have been revised. Teachers have been working on setting grade level goals. So each of the grade levels worked together on creating their own goals. And then each teacher created classroom level goals for their group of students and what students they wanted to be able to move. So when I had set the goals in August and shared with you, those have been revised, the original goals. So I increased them because we didn't lose ground from last spring. We made up some actually. We've actually dismissed more than 60 students from intervention in November. So we start intervention the second week of school based on spring numbers. So we've already dismissed 60 students from that small group targeted intervention, which I think is great in K through 6. So based on that, our year-long goal for the end of the year is for us for reading to be at 80% for tier 1 and less than 5 for tier 3, and then for math being over 75 for tier 1 and less than 5 in tier 3. And then lastly, so just a few things that this is stuff that we are continuing with. We're working continuously on our strong our MTSS process for academic success in working through interventions for students. We have clean frameworks at this point in math and ELA, K up through high school. Teachers are following frameworks. We're able to finally this year, this is the first year probably in the past few years that we're getting through the content that they need to without having to dive too far back to review skills that students did not have. We give common assessments at this point after each module in their framework, which are the application type problems that mimic a similar question to a PSSA or a Keystone exam to try to see that increase that rigor in questioning. We've been focusing more on our PDAs now that we're back in school. Class-wide intervention and small group interventions are continuing. And then the critical piece that Kristen mentioned at the beginning is that we finally are in a spot where foundational skills had to be addressed first. Until that's there, we can't make any application. So we're finally in a spot where the foundational skills are where we want them. So we've been talking to the teachers and they know that now we can start working finally on that application piece. So I think we're in a good position. I feel proud of the work that's happening here. And I feel like our benchmarks have never been as good as they've been now. So I think that we're making great strides academically.
How did they really get that real world?
Yes.
Very.
Yep.
I think it really shows what we're doing, going back. It's been really.
Yep.
Did you, I'm sorry, Jason, same stuff? Oh, okay.
He was complimenting.
Did you have an opportunity to take a look at the summer program, the impacts on the summer program and last slide? I know that there's great effort put into those programs at the ELC. And maybe I guess you can only do that from second to third grade group or third to fourth. I don't know who's involved.
I don't have the specific data on
You
that.
don't have it.
I mean, we can try to look for the kids enrolled to see if that made a difference.
Just didn't know what the future plan was for that program. I guess that would run 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, all that money is gonna come to an end, and that's gonna be a big conversation too, when this money does come to an end. What kind of intervention we can commit ourselves to as a school. So, yeah, that's gonna be part of the conversation.
How do you, based on, how do you measure success? Future, there is a conversation, okay, funding, like, have more fun. Like, how do you do success with that?
I mean, I think as far as data is concerned, the kids that go to those programs and what kind of progress they've made, we could look at that. We can look at the interventions that are given and the interventionist groups of kids they've worked with and how much gain they've made. So when it comes to those situations, when we're presenting to the board of what we need to continue on or financially support, that would be good data that we could pull for that. For sure.
We can
Benchmark score.
pause.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you.
All right. Moving along, the Immaculata University Center enrollment.
Brian, do you want to do that?
It's footwork. They can't hear you on the thing.
Come on.
Over the summer, there was a legislative change that allows charter schools now to enter into direct articulation agreements with IHE. So we did some of this in the past, but we're now able to go direct, get more favorable, as well as the favorable MOUs and agreements with higher ed. And before the board tonight is an updated letter of agreement with Immaculata, which would begin in January. And then there's a second agenda item that is one direct with Delaware County Community College. They are different. Delaware County has its own specific entrance requirements. So the provisions of the agreements are really driven by the requirements for entrance and enrollment by the IHE. You will see in both of these, as well as with a policy that's being presented to the board tonight for first reading, the concurrent enrollment in dual credit one, that policy goes hand in hand with these agreements to put us in line with the new legislative requirements from the summer. What is different about these agreements from the past is that from the legislative standpoint, if we have students entering into a dual credit scenario with an IHE that we have an agreement with and we accept back dual credit, that we would then therefore be financially responsible for the tuition fees and books of the students' enrollment. So the goal is to increase exposure to dual credit, dual enrollment opportunities with higher ed. But as a charter school, the legislation was written that we are required to. School districts may choose to, but charter schools are required to. So that was, and within the legislation, it had some provisions about the credits have to be accepted back based on IB or AP credit weighting at the secondary school. So there were some other little nuances that clarified some past questions, but the larger portion of that bill was the billing requirement. And that billing requirement is included in both of these agreements to direct bill the school.
So administration is looking for a motion to approve the agreement. There's two, so we'll do them individually. The agreement between AGCS and Immaculata University.
Well, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
For Immaculata, Brian, you might be able to answer this question. Was it Avon Charter's decision or Immaculata's decision to say that a student must have an average of a B or better in coursework at Avon Charter School in order to take Immaculata courses? Can we go back and ask them? And could you see if they'd be willing to lower that to a C average? But here's my thinking, right? You're a student and you are taking rigorous courses and you get 2 A's, a B, and 4 C's, and you're at overall course average of the C, right? You, in my opinion, if you're paying for it and you want the challenge of dual credits, I think that's silly.
But they're not paying for it. We're paying for it now.
Right. So you guys should be in charge of making that decision, not Immaculata.
We can take the credit based on the credit. See?
So what this is saying is basically that you need to be a B student in an AGCS in order to meet their entrance requirement.
And previously, because I know when I was here, that wasn't part of the agreement. I know I had students that did not have the averages, take Immaculata courses, pass them, and earn dual credit.
I understand.
For it. So listen, should there be an expectation? Yes. My thought is there's going to be at some point students with a C average that want to take Immaculata courses, and if they want to take that challenge, I don't think a C average should hold them back.
Well, and then I think that and this is totally up to the board. If these I don't know if these necessarily need to be approved tonight in order for the spring term. So if you would want to table this, I can reach out to them and say that, and then you could approve these at the same time as you review the dual credit policy, because there are application and student requirements that we tried to marry so that it wasn't sort of a free for all, right?
Sure.
Because now the billing is direct to us, and that there's a provision in there about add drop periods so that if we get billed and then the kid drops the class, that they're end up being financially responsible for that.
Because I didn't see that same provision in the Delaware County.
Delaware counties is completely different. So like theirs is if you look at, when you look in the policy and review it, we tried to marry some of the requirements together
Sure.
about SAT or PSAT requirements and grade point averages and things so that we create a little bit of a gatekeeping system, but at the same time, set an expectation so that it's not a free for all on the bank, right? And that we set kids up for success, that if you're a C student and maybe you want to try, maybe wait till your junior year or senior year, focus on your academics here, and then you can still take that in the subsequent school year.
Well, I'm assuming you still have to be a junior or a senior to even enroll. Right?
They actually allow 10th graders if you meet the requirements. Some of our 10th graders have taken PSATs and things before, and they meet AccuPlacer. That's just really dependent upon if you meet that entrance criteria.
Yeah, so my only gripe would be that B average could be discussed about maybe lowering that to a C average for those students that want to take on that challenge, if it's financially feasible for the school as well. Right, like I don't know how many kids that would be, but I'm sure there's going to be a time where a kid has a C average applies, and I'd hate to see a kid not be able to take that course because of the C average.
And in the policy, there's multiple measures. So
Sure,
you have to have, you might have
I get it.
you might have the B average, but not have the PSAT or SAT entrance requirements. So then you kind of have to meet multiple measures.
Is it a privilege or a right?
In terms of what? Like
Then being able to.
it's a privilege. So we don't have to enter into these agreements with IHE.
That's my, I guess I look at opposite end. Label. Privilege. Get that. That's Harvard saying, well, okay, we're gonna drop our grade point out or SAT score. Wow.
Why is there a privilege?
You just have a privilege.
Yeah, I disagree that.
But isn't a we correct it, so right, because we have to pay for it. So if we didn't have these programs.
It's a privilege in terms of the school entering into the agreements and offering the program. We're not bound to do that. But once we do it, then we have to pay for them.
Typically, we haven't been able to one per semester.
We have lost high school students because other school districts will do that.
All high schools offer going on at
Yeah, so this will make us more competitive, better fit. So
Funding frame, has anybody done a study of like the financial impact?
We talked about how many kids are currently in college courses. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. Do you have that off the top of your?
And I have how much it would cost to. Yeah.
It's pretty much a family paper.
Right. So like would more have entered if these conditions existed? So you're kind of trying to calculate a hypothetical. But right now we have 17 students that are enrolled in the fall class with Immaculata. We don't have any students who went ad hoc and enrolled in Delaware County on their own right now.
So what would that
About
would it be in?
a little over 6,000. Remember, they're getting it's $100 a credit for 3 credits. So it's not graduate tuition.
Would be put in book footage.
Yeah, because you're county based working with them,
Yeah.
it's 100. I believe both of them are $100 a credit, a 3 credit the class. So
And hopefully class size of the high school courses that you have now that are too full and that we need to reduce, or you're hiring more teachers. So
And most likely those courses are courses that we don't, that Allen Potter does not offer us. Right,
Significant business.
and that's normally historically what it's been.
that cost is less expensive than some of the majority of the online courses that we use to supplement our in-house course catalog.
And really $6,000 per semester, right? So you're talking $12,000 per year. To get a teacher, it's going to cost you quadruple that.
No.
Right? So to me, to limit it,
So
it's
what
silly.
they're saying is the first one,
I'll look at Immaculata. Yep.
take it off, go back.
Or do you want to approve it with an amendment that we could look at it? Because because right now you're limiting them all A's and B kids that want to take that class work anyway. So we can come back if they say C and at least include them with that. So you could do it with an amendment so that you're not holding up kids to register for Immaculata.
That's okay. Does also approving this have an impact?
It could, that's what we were saying for the spring.
Well, if you had it by December 13th, does that?
I don't think that would.
Probably not enough time, right? Because you're talking when's the second semester will start, probably.
Well, we have a current
Okay.
agreement with them right now anyways. It's an updated one that would include the billing invoice.
Right.
So if we operated under the current agreement, it would Immaculata may end up then requiring the student enrolled to upfront pay, and then we may have to go through reimbursement back to the family because the direct invoicing agreement wouldn't be signed. So I don't think it would stop enrollment. It might just mess with the way in which things are billed.
The only other question.
With Cecil County.
Again,
So Delaware County has 3 different programs. There's like open enrollment, there's a pathway program, and then there's a college and high school program. So this is kind of like the foot in the door to start those conversations with Delaware County and how we could potentially in the future structure some of that. So, but I think that it would be helpful then to sit and look at the both of these, and then the board also look at the policy provisions, because I think you're looking at then we as in policy can be more restrictive, right, than what the agreements say, but not less restrictive, because then the IHE has their own. So when you're looking at the policy of guidelines for eligibility, we tried to look at like how do we bring some of these together and not be less restrictive than either of the 2 agreements, but be somewhat in line, and maybe end up having to apply our own internal eligibility to the more strict of the 2 policies. Does that make sense? Like if one's easier and one's more difficult, we're going to make the internal policy of eligibility towards the more difficult and make that apply to even the one that might be easier, because then they would have met that. I think that made sense. So you want to, I think it's okay tabling if you want to look at those side by side, and I can go back to both of them.
One of the issues is I see that they're asking for the one in Delaware, to that by November the 11th. We've already bypassed.
Yep,
that
I talked to
date.
them already.
And then also with Immaculata, I think they're asking for what's in the box.
Yep. And they were aware that we were waiting till they sent them to us,
Okay.
and then they were aware that it was going to be had to be board approved, and that this was our board date. So I can always go back to them again and just explain the
I
situation.
think if you push that, if they say, no, we're not going to maybe, but you need to have it before the board, let us know, we could do an
Sure.
online and ratify.
Yep. And again, I think it would be more of like, it will just be the direct billing invoice issue.
So are you waiting on both? That was
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
And like I said.
And then you can look at passing these and the policy at the same time.
But if they come back with a, no, it's gonna be a B, you don't have it in by December 1st, you're done, we can do it and then ratify it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't wanna hold that.
Thank you.
The next thing is, we did have a vote on an employee issue. Is there any emotion to, on what to do with that employee issue?
doing, Stacy Barner, I'd like to make a motion.
Is there any questions or comments on that? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that will be tabled till December 13th. We did have a meeting about a confidential student matter. Is there a motion to approve that agreement? Any questions or comments? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved. Thank you very much. AG Treasurer report.
So AGCS financial statement approval. Fiscal period ending June 30th, 2022 financial statements. Based on the administration's review of the audited financial statements as presented, administration is recommending financials presented to the board of trustees. Consideration to approve. The AGCS administration is requesting that the board approve the financial statements as presented under the consent agenda. The 2022 July, August, September financial statements will be presented at the next board meeting. Number 2, 2022 October accounting report. The committee reviewed the 2022 October fund activity report, the vendor billing report, and the October bank register. Requesting the board approve the 2022 October accounting report as presented under the consent agenda. Number 3, the cash position is November 10th, 2022. The school's cash position cash is reported as very good. Sending school districts monthly payments are current. Number 4, the 2022 2021-2022 fiscal year audit. This year, the AGCS engaged Robert King Thornton and Company LLP to perform the 2021-2022 fiscal year audit. The audit has been completed with no findings reported. Copy of the finalized 2021-2022 audit will be issued in early December. Copies of the audit and the management letter will be provided to the Finance Committee for discussion and then presented to the board for approval at a December public board meeting. Number 5, 2021-2022 PDE 2057 annual financial report. The 2021-2022 PDE 2057 annual financial report has been completed. The annual review and verification of the financial data was completed, and the electronic filing was submitted timely. Based on the review of the annual financial report, as prepared by Charter Choices and as presented, administration is recommending that the 2021-2022 PDE 2057 annual financial report be presented to the Board of Trustees at the November 15th, 2022 board meeting. The AGCS administration will be requesting the board approve the 2021-2022 PDE 2057 annual financial report as presented under the consent agenda. Facilities equipment service agreement. Carrier Corporation Facilities has reviewed the HVAC maintenance plan service agreement for the KELC units. This maintenance agreement was a budget extension for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. The agreement is in keeping with the same scope of service pricing. The Finance Committee has reviewed the proposal and agreed with presenting the proposal to the board for their recommendation to approve the consent agenda. Cyberless, thank you. Great. Facilities has received the HVAC maintenance plan service agreement for the KELC units. This maintenance agreement was budgeted expenditure for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. The agreement is in keeping with the same scope of service pricing. Right. The Finance Committee has recommended the proposal and agreed with presenting the proposal to the board for their consideration to approve under the consent agenda. The AGCS long-term facilities plan 2023 summer capital improvement project. The facilities manager, administration, Beckendorf and Childs met last month to review the AGCS school-wide long-term facility plan for the purpose of reviewing and prioritizing the capital improvement project projected projects slated for the summer of 2023. 2 projects were identified, and the administration is recommending the school move forward with the necessary due diligence required for the school to understand the scope of it and the cost prior to making recommendations for it. Projects identified: State Road Campus, Art Wing casework renovation. Beckendorf and Child was provided a service proposal for the professional service associated with the construction documentation and the bid phase services for the capital improvement project. If AGCS decides to move forward with this project, the construction and bid documentation will be required. Total cost approved is $15,740. Please note that the NEPFP engineering services are included in. The finance committee has reviewed the proposal and agreed with presenting the proposal to the facilities committee and the board for their consideration to approve. AGCS administration will be requesting the board approve second and child Art Lane casework renovation proposal as presented under the consent agenda. KELC campus cafeteria, air conditioning, schematic design services. Secondary and Childs Architects has provided a service proposal for the construction of services associated with schematic design associated with the air conditioning at the KELC cafeteria. Yeah. The intent of these services is to determine true budget and project schedule. The total cost proposed is $15,360. Please note that the NEPFP and structural engineering services were included in the proposal. The finance committee has reviewed the proposal and agreed with presenting the proposal to the facilities committee and the board for their consideration to approve. The AGCS administration will be requesting the board approve the Eckendorf and Child KELC campus cafeteria air conditioning schematic design proposal as presented under the consent agenda. Number 7, the annual 2022 board public disclosure updated appendix A. The annual public disclosure document AGCS appendix A is required by the board by our board of trustees was discussed. The report is due September 30th, 2022. Once the audit and certification certificates are received, the annual appendix A report will be finalized. The report will be submitted to all board members prior to a filing date scheduled for November 29th, 2022. Last but not least, I have a motion to approve the business office consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Any comments, questions?
Can we break out first part?
The first part, number 1. Fiscal period financial statement.
I don't know.
That's the first.
Is the first one? Yes. We break it out.
We.
Oh,
You're number 2.
Number 22.
Sure.
Just break out.
Yeah, so I'll motion to approve everything under the consent agenda with the exception of item 2, the 2022 October accounting reports to be voted on.
Any questions or comments on that? Favor.
Aye.
Opposed? So can I also have a motion then to approve the 2022 October?
I'll make the motion.
Any comments or questions?
Consider, yeah.
This is where you can do it.
Yeah, just making my comment. I think we should do both books, even if it's 45, 60 days out.
Duly noted. And second.
Brian raised his hand.
Brian, perfect. All like that.
It's all good.
Brian, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Yeah.
Carries.
Right, all right. Moving on, state.
January. And Megan. The poll. Melissa. Any discussion?
Just a question. In regard to teacher, we also need the teacher physical, like, was expected, like, we back to
They were both
music
expected.
is here.
Yeah.
Here in the car.
They were both expected and they're both, both being filled. They both were expected.
Any other questions or comments?
All right. Policies. All right. Policies that were presented in October for the board to review and consideration to approve for the November 15th meeting are as follows. I would be looking for a motion to approve these policies. They are 2047 paving, 6008 food services, 6015 acceptable use of internet, computers, and network resources, 6030 breach of computerized personnel information, and 6008.1 food handling of special events. Do I have a motion to approve these policies?
I'll make-
Any questions or discussion?
The additional policy. Sorry.
It's okay. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, in addition, the following policies are being recommended to be rescinded as they have been replaced by the ones we just approved. Those are computer usage policy, internet safety policy, staff use of technology equipment policy, use of privately owned devices policy, use of privately owned computer policy, accessible use policy for technology, and food services policy. Do I have a motion to approve the rescinding of those policies?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further comment or question? Do I have a second? You all in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. The following policies are being presented to the board for review and consideration to approve at the December 13th public board meeting. They are 1015 concurrent enrollment dual credit, 2000 administration and enrollment of students, 2001 .1 dual enrollment, 7001 public relation objectives, 7003 public participation in board meetings, 7004 public attendance at charter school events. In addition, the following policies are being recommended to be rescinded as they will be redundant with the policies approved above. Those are public participation and speakers at board meetings, admission of student lottery process, dual enrollment, and enrollment policy. All right, we are at the end. Any further comment from the school principals or directors? Brian? Nope. All right. Any other committee reports? Nope. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting until December 13th? Thank you. Any questions, comments, follow-up? Do I have a second?
Second, Charity Long.
I like it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Not too bad with